Surge testing and a push to get people vaccinated in England's COVID hotspots in the northwest. It comes after a rise in cases of the Delta variant, first found in India. Local leaders are now calling for more vaccines.
The thing the government needs to do is also bring forward vaccine supplies in the high case areas. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, have a surge vaccination programme.
We'll be looking at whether there are adequate supplies of vaccine to step up the programme. Also this lunchtime, the High Court rules the government acted unlawfully over a COVID contract worth £500,000 given to a company run by friends of Dominic Cummings. No breakthrough but no breakdown after talks between the UK and the EU on Northern Ireland trade. Differing accounts of the naming of Prince Harry and Meghan's daughter Lilibet. And carry on camping. Pubs, farms and stately homes call for rules to be relaxed so they can open temporary camping sites for longer.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, training in the sunshine. The England squad go through their paces at St George's Park with their first game at the Euros just 4 days away.
Good afternoon and welcome to the BBC News at 1. Coronavirus testing is being stepped up in areas of northwest England to try to deal with the rise in cases of the Delta variant, first identified in India. The whole of Greater Manchester and Lancashire will get help from the military to carry out extra tests, similar to the tactics used in Bolton. But local leaders have asked for extra jabs to vaccinate everyone even faster. It comes as speculation continues about whether England's lockdown will be fully lifted as planned on the 21st of June. This morning, new data showed that around 8 in 10 adults in the UK had COVID antibodies. Our health correspondent Jim Reed reports.
Manchester in the June summer sun. But beneath the surface here, COVID infections have been rising from a low level, driven in part by the more transmissible Delta variant, first found in India.
I think we should keep things in perspective, but clearly, as this variant is 40% more transmissible, we are likely to see a significant increase in cases in Manchester and Greater Manchester over the next few weeks.
Under new government guidance, residents are being advised to minimise travel into and out of affected areas, and meeting indoors is being discouraged. The affected areas are Bolton and the remaining 9 boroughs of Greater Manchester. Also to the north of the city, Blackburn, as well as most of Lancashire, including Burnley and Preston.
Well, this isn't the law, it is extra guidance to help people, and we're asking people to use a degree of personal responsibility and good judgment. But this isn't a return to the local lockdowns, for example, that we saw last year.
In Bolton, extra door-to-door testing and a vaccination drive now appears to have driven down infections. The idea is to use the same tactics in those other areas, now seeing a rise in cases and hospital admissions. Back in January, there were 4,346 people with COVID in a hospital bed in the northwest. That fell to just 142 by May 19th. But since then, the number has slowly started to rise again to 246. Health officials say those in hospital do appear to be less sick than in previous waves, as vaccines protect the most vulnerable. Local leaders would now like to see the rollout speeded up.
The thing the government needs to do is also bring forward vaccine supplies in the high case areas. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, have a surge vaccination programme in all parts of the country where the cases are higher, and that would include here. That won't just be right for people here, it will be safe but better for everybody across the UK.
Government sources say supplies of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are limited, making it hard to offer extra doses to any one region. All this matters not just to the 4 million people living in the northwest, but to the rest of the country, with less than a fortnight to go until final lockdown restrictions are due to be lifted across all of England. Jim Reed, BBC News.
Well, our health correspondent Dominic Hughes is in Manchester for us. Dominic, a call for more vaccines for these areas. Why is that problematic?
Well, Rita, we heard in Jim's piece, didn't we, Andy Burnham issuing that call for a surge in vaccinations in areas that are seeing a spike in infections driven by this Delta variant that was first identified in India. Now, that matters because there are a large number of people under the age of 40 who still aren't vaccinated, and we know that those people who are winding up in hospital, who are falling so ill they need to be admitted to hospital, generally either only have one dose of the vaccine or no vaccine at all. So the logic is, if you can surge the vaccine to those people, improve the number of people who are taking up the vaccine, 18 plus, then you can cut the pressure on the health system. The problem with that is that while the UK government say they have a stockpile of around 5 million doses, almost all of that is AstraZeneca, and that is not the vaccine that's being offered to the under 40s. We know we import around 1.5 million doses of Pfizer and Moderna a week, but that wouldn't be enough to spread it around all the regions of the UK. So the problem is, if you surge vaccinations in one area, there possibly isn't the supply available to guarantee that that wouldn't mean shortages in other regions.
Thanks very much. Dominic Hughes there. The High Court has ruled the government acted unlawfully when it gave a contract worth £560,000 to a company run by friends of Boris Johnson's former adviser, Dominic Cummings. The judge said there was a real danger the government's decision to award the work to Public First was biased because it didn't consider any other companies. The Cabinet Office says it's already changed the way it decides who receives contracts. Well, our correspondent Lucy Manning joins me now. Lucy, tell us more about this ruling.
Well, the government was challenged in the High Court by the campaign group The Good Law Project, who've been challenging the government on a number of contracts they have awarded during the COVID crisis. This was a £500,000 contract awarded to a market research agency called Public First. It was run by friends of Dominic Cummings, then the Prime Minister's chief advisor, and it was challenged to say that it shouldn't have been awarded to this company. Now, the judge, Mrs. Justice O'Farrell, she found that on two of the counts that actually the government hadn't done anything wrong, but on the final count, whether they'd shown apparent bias, yes, that was right. And she found that they had acted unlawfully, not specifically because of the connections between Dominic Cummings and these people, but because no other companies were considered for this significant contract. It is embarrassing for the government, but Mr. Cummings has been tweeting out his response, and he says that this judgment is essentially saying that in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, you should be having in government a paper trail and concentrating on the paper trail rather than anything else. The Cabinet Office said it's pleased that the court said there was no suggestion of actual bias, and Public First said it's proud of the work that it did over the COVID crisis to help the country and help save lives.
OK, thank you. Lucy Manning there. The Brexit Minister Lord Frost says that talks with the EU have ended without breakthroughs or breakdowns as officials try to resolve post-Brexit trading problems that have fuelled tensions in Northern Ireland. Despite leaving the bloc, Northern Ireland continues to follow EU food safety rules, which could mean hampering the delivery of ordinary items like sausages. Well, our political correspondent Jess Parker is in Westminster for us. So, Jess, no progress, but they have got to find a resolution soon.
Yeah, so we've heard from Lord Frost on the UK side in the last hour, and as you say, he's saying no breakdowns but no breakthroughs. We'll be hearing, we think, from the EU fairly shortly on how they think the talks have gone. But this is all, of course, as you mentioned, because of special arrangements reached for Northern Ireland in order to prevent a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. Northern Ireland's continue to follow many EU rules. That's had a knock-on impact in terms of certain goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. There are some grace periods that were put in place to allow time for people to get used to those checks and changes. The UK went ahead and unilaterally extended a couple of those. The EU was not happy about that. It's warned the UK not to do it again. Interestingly, though, Lord Frost not ruling that out, actually, in the last hour when he was asked about that. There is time pressure on this because one of those grace periods is about to run out at the end of this month. That's in relation to chilled meats, hence all the headlines about sausages. What the UK is saying is it wants the EU to be more flexible, less purist. The EU saying it wants the UK to work within the terms of the deal that it indeed signed. And it is all a little bit reminiscent, isn't it, of Brexit talks that we've heard in the past. The UK saying it wants to maintain its sovereignty. The EU saying it needs to maintain its standards, protect its single market. So Brexit may have happened, deals may have been signed, but the wrangling goes on.
Jess, thank you very much. Jessica Parker there. Now, world leaders will be arriving in Cornwall ahead of the G7 summit, which starts on Friday. It's the first foreign visit for the US President Joe Biden since his election, and it'll be the first meeting between him and Boris Johnson as leaders. There are big issues ahead of them, including a future trade deal and the Northern Ireland Protocol. Ahead of the summit talks, our North America editor John Sopel has been speaking to the US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan.
If the administration were producing a bumper sticker for this trip, it would be "America is back," a point underlined by the President's National Security Advisor speaking exclusively to the BBC.
When we show up in Cornwall, we will be there to help lead the G7 in ending the pandemic. We will be there with incredible domestic growth to help power a global economic recovery. I think we will be showing through our deeds that the United States is capable right now, today, of actually delivering bold and decisive action to help solve problems that afflict people everywhere around the world.
One domestic issue where Joe Biden can be expected to weigh in is on Northern Ireland, where the US is watching with some unease British attempts to amend or renegotiate the Northern Ireland Protocol that puts a de facto border for trade between mainland Britain and the province.
Whatever way they find to proceed must, at its core, fundamentally protect the gains of the Good Friday Agreement and not imperil that. And that is the message that President Biden will send when he's in Cornwall.
And if he had any indication that it would imperil the Good Friday Agreement, would that jeopardize a future US-UK trade deal?
I don't want to sit here today and negotiate in public around linkage or make some claim or threat. I would just say that our concern runs very deep on the Northern Ireland issue.
It had been widely touted that a 15-month-old travel ban on Britons and Europeans entering the US would be scrapped by President Biden at the G7 summit. But that is clearly not going to happen anytime soon.
When are we going to find out about the reopening of the borders to allow people from the UK to travel into the US?
I can't give you a time frame on it, I'm afraid. I have to defer to the objective evidence-based process, and those of us at the White House don't dictate that process, don't shape that process, because it's left in the hands of the professionals.
As final preparations are made in Cornwall, there'll be relief among G7 leaders to see a more familiar style of American president. Less isolationist, more supportive of international bodies, less capricious. But there's unease too about how reliable a partner the US will be in the long term. John Sopel, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent John Kay is at Carbis Bay in Cornwall, where the G7 summit is taking place. And how is the local community viewing all of this, John?
I think it's fair to say that feelings are mixed, Rita. Certainly there's a lot of pride and excitement that pictures are going to be shown all over the planet over the next few days of world leaders elbow bumping on the beaches of Cornwall. Great pride that this county is hosting such a huge event. But, you know, some people have real frustrations and misgivings about it even before it starts. I spoke to one couple last night who are moving out of their house because they just can't bear it. The road closures, the military helicopters going overhead, the disruption that's going to take place over the next few days. You know, St Ives doesn't normally have a police station at all, but they've just had 5,500 extra officers, many of them armed, that have turned up, been drafted in from all over the UK to protect the two hotels which are going to be hosting these meetings. I spoke to a fisherman this morning who went out on the water to check his lobster pots, and he was turned back by a warship and told that he couldn't access that part of the water at the moment for security reasons. But you know, there are winners too. Hotels, self-catering accommodations. I spoke to one business that's providing the goodie bags of shower gel and dog biscuits that might end up going to the White House. So benefits, misgivings, and a big question about what protests could bring.
John, thank you very much. John Kay. A Buckingham Palace source has told the BBC that the Queen was not consulted by Prince Harry and Meghan before using her childhood nickname for their newborn daughter, Lilibet. But a spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess say she was supportive. Well, our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond is here with me. So, Johnny, differing accounts between the Sussexes and Buckingham Palace.
Yes, very different accounts. And this comes, as you say, Rita, after Sunday's announcement by Harry and Meghan that they were going to name their newborn daughter Lilibet Diana. Over the next couple of days, stories began to emerge from various sources that the Queen had given permission for this to happen. And then, as you say, a palace source told the BBC that the Queen had, the phrase was, never been asked about the name. That elicited a rather contradictory statement from the Duke and Duchess's spokesperson, who said that the Queen was the first person that Harry told about the announcement, that he had shared with her the hope of naming the child Lilibet in her honour, and that had she not been supportive, the couple would not have used their name. So two very different accounts and a pretty extraordinary clash of versions.
Johnny, thank you very much. The time is 1:15 now. Top story this lunchtime. Surge testing and a push to get people vaccinated in England's COVID hotspots in the northwest. And still to come, moving online. A new report finds UK adults spent an average of more than 3.5 hours online every day during the pandemic.
Coming up on the BBC News Channel, 12 years old and heading to the Olympics. Sky Brown books her place on Team GB as skateboarding makes its debut at the Games.
Campaigners are calling on the government to close legal loopholes to protect vulnerable people from so-called predatory marriages. The term refers to someone being led into a marriage who doesn't have the mental capacity to consent. The cause has been taken up by a Labour MP who this lunchtime told the Prime Minister that he'd been contacted by hundreds of people who've been affected by the issue. Lakshmi Gopal reports.
Daphne is visiting the grave of her late mother, Joan. Joan was in her 90s and had dementia when a few months before her death, a man 24 years her junior married her without the family knowing until after she died.
The witnesses were his son and a lady from the pub, and none of the family or none of Mum's friends knew about the marriage. And Mum most certainly didn't, because she couldn't remember more than 4 minutes.
According to the registrar's written account afterwards, they believed Joan had the mental capacity to decide to wed, but Daphne says her mother's dementia ruled that out.
She really struggled to remember her date of birth. She couldn't remember her address. We know that one of the registrars on the day said, "Are you sure she's fit to marry?" And they had a little conversation, and then somehow they decided to go ahead.
5 months later, in March 2016, Joan died and he inherited her house.
Under English law, marriage automatically revokes any previous wills. This means the spouse often gets the majority, if not all, of the deceased's estate, no matter how short the marriage. Campaigners say this provides an incentive to exploit vulnerable people, and an MP is trying to get the law changed.
Will the Prime Minister now act to bring this cruel exploitation to an end?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for raising the concern that he has and the injustice that he mentioned. I'll make sure that he gets a meeting as soon as possible with the relevant minister in the Justice Department.
Daphne's been contacted by a growing number of families in the same situation and wants more robust safeguarding so registrars can better identify potential victims of predatory marriage in future.
It could happen to everyone's mum, anyone's father. It could happen to us when we get older. I just want it stopped.
A statement previously given to the BBC on behalf of the man Joan married, Coleman Folan, said Joan wanted to marry me and I believed at the time, and still do, that she had capacity to make that decision for herself. Joan is buried in an unmarked grave owned by Mr. Folan. Daphne says she isn't even allowed to place a headstone on it.
It makes it feel like she has been abandoned. She hasn't been abandoned by us, and we'll never abandon her till we can get some justice.
She hopes a change in the law can bring her some form of closure and prevent others from being exploited in their final years. Lakshmi Gopal, BBC News.
The trial has begun for the teenager accused of murdering two sisters in a London park. Daniel Hussein is accused of stabbing 27-year-old Nicole Smallman and Bibba Henry, who was 46, in June last year. The court was told the teenager had made a pact with the devil, promising to sacrifice women in exchange for winning the lottery. He denies the murder charges. June Kelly has more.
Last weekend, Mina Smallman and her family had to face the first anniversary of the deaths of her two daughters. Today they came to the Old Bailey to see a teenager go on trial accused of killing them both. Bibba Henry, on the left, died within hours of celebrating her 46th birthday outside in a park during lockdown. Her younger sister, Nicole Smallman, who was 27, was murdered beside her. Their bodies were discovered with their limbs intertwined. In the dock is 19-year-old Daniel Hussein. He was arrested last summer, a few months after his 18th birthday. He denies murdering the two women. The prosecutor, Oliver Glasgow QC, told the jury that when the defendant's bedroom was searched, the police found a handwritten document purporting to be an agreement between the defendant and a demon, in which he promised to sacrifice women in order to win the lottery and not to be suspected of the crimes he had committed. The court heard how images from the birthday celebration showed the sisters dancing together with fairy lights. They stayed on in the park after their friends had left. The following day, they did not respond to phone calls. Concerned friends began a search. They returned to the scene of the birthday party, Friant Country Park in Wembley in North London. They discovered a knife, and then they found the women's bodies. Bibba Henry had been stabbed 8 times and appeared to have been attacked first. Nicole Smallman's injuries indicated she had tried to fight off her attacker. She was stabbed 28 times.
The court was told that DNA from the defendant, Daniel Hussein, was found on the bodies of both women and on a blood-stained knife close by. 48 hours before the killings, he had bought an identical knife in Asda. The prosecution opening is continuing. June Kelly, BBC News at the Old Bailey.
The potential of 1.8 billion young people around the world risks being thrown away if leaders don't take the opportunity to deliver better skills and jobs. That's according to the World Bank. They say that those under 25 have borne the brunt of job and wage cuts as a result of the pandemic and costly lockdowns. Our global trade correspondent Darshini David reports.
Sun, sand, and one of the highest youth unemployment rates in Europe. It's not just tourism in Cadiz in southern Spain that's been hit by COVID, but also the shipbuilding and aviation industry, and so the job prospects of engineering graduate Carmen.
There aren't many jobs right now, at least here in Cadiz. Most of my friends are really frustrated. The only jobs that they are required for are internships. So most of them are angry and frustrated because they have been working already, they have a bit of experience, and they are still required to be paid less and to work in worse conditions.
Her professor says a lack of opportunities predates COVID, provoking many to leave the province.
Ideally, they should finish their studying here, work here, pay their taxes here, create wealth here and start their businesses here. But it takes the creation of 36,000 companies to absorb all the unemployment in the province of Cadiz.
Globally, more than 1 billion young people have missed out on employment, education and training. But so far, the battle against COVID has been focused on protecting the physical health of the elderly.
The brunt of this is being borne by young people to some extent, because they are the ones who need those early opportunities. So it's in the interest of not widening inequality in society as a whole that more of an effort is made to support young people to finish their education and get into employment.
What are the risks if those who can make a difference, policymakers, businesses, ignore that kind of advice?
We're throwing away the potential of 1.8 billion young people.
Wherever you are, there's no easy solution. Ignoring young people's prospects now could blight their lives for decades. Alternatively, there's the opportunity to equip them better for the jobs of the future. Darshini David, BBC News.
Adults in the UK spent an average of more than 3.5 hours online every day during the pandemic. That's far longer than people in Germany, France or Spain, according to the media regulator Ofcom. Its annual report says the pandemic accelerated a shift to online. Our technology correspondent Rory Kethlen-Jones has more.
As the pandemic arrived, life moved online, whether it was exercising via YouTube, ordering food via a few clicks rather than leaving home. Do this. For the Lee family, that meant entertaining themselves making TikTok videos, as well as endless hours on video calls for Harrison and Darcy's studies and Dad Paul's work.
I think the biggest thing is just more consumption. I'm on my phone more. Obviously, I'm a student, so I would have to go on my laptop and do online lecturing, online seminars. Everything's just online. There was no face-to-face.
During lockdown, it gave us an opportunity to actually do some activities with the family, the young adults. Instead of going shopping, let's spend the whole day learning some dance routines and videoing and have some fun. So for me, as a father, it was a great opportunity to do some child bonding, I suppose. Yeah.
What did you think of that, Harrison?
Oh, I loved it. Most people think, oh, Dad, don't get involved, you're so embarrassing. But actually, I kind of egged him on to get involved.
You got me involved. You said, come on, Dad, let's do this. I was like, okay.
In 2020, the UK embraced the internet as never before, with the average person spending over 3.5 hours a day online. Much of that time was spent shopping. Online food and drink sales were up 82% on the previous year. And one of the big winners was TikTok, which had 3 million UK users 6 months before the pandemic and now attracts 14 million every day. Whether it's the morning video call to the grandchildren or updating the online shopping list on a tablet, we've all got used to how vital these connected devices can be. We've been spending more time online than the citizens of any other major European nation. But here's the question: is this a permanent change in our habits?
Well, I'm sure there will be a lasting legacy from lockdown. For example, I rather suspect that business travel may not rise to the same levels that we saw before. We've discovered the technology serves us pretty well. Or when it comes to online shopping, we've discovered the convenience of having things delivered to us. But equally, I'm sure that I'm not alone in missing the buzz and the excitement and the energy of being on the high street.
Even as things gradually get back to normal, the pandemic has accelerated the move online, and that means technology is playing a bigger part in our lives for good and ill. Rory Kethlen-Jones, BBC News.
The sale of halogen light bulbs is to be banned in the UK from September. The bulbs began to be phased out in 2018, and the government says their complete removal will cut carbon emissions and save consumers money. Around 2/3 of bulbs sold in the UK are now LED lights, which last 5 times longer and use less power. Pubs, farms and stately homes are calling for rules to be relaxed so that they can open temporary camping sites for longer and try to recoup losses from the past year. Makeshift sites in England and Wales are allowed to open for only 56 days. But a new campaign called Carry On Camping says they've been a lifeline for many rural businesses. Here's our Consumer Affairs correspondent, Coletta Smith.
Like every landlord, it's been tough for Fiona seeing a totally empty pub for so much of the year. She's hoping for customers and lots of them over the next few months. But rather than relying on passing trade, Fiona has come up with a plan.
Hi Fiona, nice to meet you. What a gorgeous place you've got here. Lovely part of the world.
It is.
So show me around. This is
It's really not glamorous. It's quite simple but effective. So we have toilets that are open all night. We can lock the pub up but leave the toilets open, and then we have an outside tap. So I was amazed. I thought, we might get 1 or 2, maybe in July or whatever. So yeah, we've been quite surprised. We have been full every night that we've been open.
Those campers are crucial for Fiona, not because of the money they pay to camp, but because of the money they spend in the pub.
We thought we've got a big expanse that we don't really utilise to its best ability. So just thought, well, while we've got this option, we'd give it a whirl.
With millions more people staying in the UK for their holidays this summer, loads of destinations are already at capacity, and there's very few sectors that can increase the amount of space that they have available as quickly as the camping sector.
Pubs have joined forces with grand, stately homes with acres of sweeping land, and farmers able to spare a field or two to ask the government to extend the length of time a makeshift campsite can run from 2 months to 6 months.
56 days is difficult because generally the biggest demand is at weekends, and so it's difficult to kind of spread out the 56 days. So it'd be better if it was unhindered and it could run right through the summer season, because often we get really good Septembers and there's high demand then for camping.
A few extra weeks of campers buying more meals and drinking more pints are crucial for Fiona.
It's the money that it'll generate in the summer to help us through the lean times in the winter.
The government says it's keeping the rules under review, and with such huge demand for camping pitches, there should be plenty of business to go round. Coletta Smith, BBC News in the Peak District.
Time for the weather now. Here's Helen Willits.
Rita, thank you. Some pretty decent camping weather across the eastern side of the country at the moment, but it's not plain sailing with the sunshine for all. This is how it looks around some of the coasts, the Cornish coast, but also the Irish Sea coast. It's further east, as you can see here, across in Mass by Sea, that we've got some sunshine. In fact, it's clear on the satellite picture, as you can see, for many central and eastern areas, whilst further west, the weather fronts are invading. We've got some patchy rain as well to come with those cloudy skies, particularly drizzly around some of the Irish coast, some misty, and the cloud is creeping eastwards, but I think for most central and eastern areas we'll hold on to that strong sunshine with moderate to high levels of pollen as well, the high 20s or mid to high 20s. Even where we've got the cloud and some patchy rain, it's pretty warm. Now, through the evening and overnight, that rain and that cloud continues in the north and west. And in fact, the cloud will drift its way further eastwards, could have a sharp shower across the southwest of England. But with all that cloud cover, it's going to be a close night, more muggy than last night for many parts of the country. And that's because we've got the southwesterly flow. The Azores high is still close by, but the weather fronts are looming large towards the north and west. So more cloud tomorrow, which coincides, of course, with the partial eclipse of the sun. Best viewed through the morning, and the south and east, I think, will have the better chance of seeing that. But do be aware again, please don't look directly at the sun because it can seriously damage your eyes. There are instruments and eclipse glasses that can allow you to be able to see it. But eventually the cloud does clear away across southern and eastern areas through the afternoon. The breeze is picking up. That will help more breaks in the cloud for eastern Scotland, probably Northern Ireland and North Wales as well. So temperatures in these areas might be just a bit up on those of today. But because we'll have taken that energy from the sun just to burn back the cloud across southern and eastern areas, therefore temperatures are not expected to be quite as high as today, but still a warm and a muggy day. Come Friday, that weather front, that active weather front in the northwest will weaken as it slips southwards. So introducing some fresher air. We go back from the southerly to southwesterly into a westerly wind. So temperatures will be lower as we go into Friday, starting to feel fresher, but it's still warm, still around about average or if not a little bit above for the time of year, but with more cloud around. But then once that drifts away, that weak weather front, high pressure re-establishes itself, that Azores high for the weekend, pushing all that cloud out of the way, allowing more sunshine to come through. And yes, what happens? We get the temperatures building once again. A little bit fresher on Saturday, but becoming pretty hot by the time we get to Sunday. Temperatures could be pushing towards 30 degrees. That's one we'll be watching in the south and the east, but warm it looks for most. Rita.
Thank you, Helen. A reminder now of our top story. Surge testing and a push to get people vaccinated in England's COVID hotspots in the northwest. That is all from BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.